at least? Or can you speak? You're on mute now. Okay, well, I don't want to impinge on the next presenters. They have a lot to share, I'm sure. So let me just go ahead and dive in. We'll do it with who we have. So I get this question a lot. I should explain, right? I get this question a lot about, I'm a magician. It's kind of my side hustle, and I enjoy that. But sometimes when I'm talking with UX folks, I get this question about, like, what's the intersection between those things? Really, there must be a lot of intersection, and I'm always kind of like, well, it's a little hard to it's a little hard to speak to that. I usually struggle with that to say what that intersection is. But the more that I think about it, the more I realize the reason for that is because there is an intersection. But to me, as a person who's a full-time UX person and also a magician, I just live and breathe that, right? And what it is that they both deal with the human mind. And in particular, they both deal with memory, right? So, for instance, if I have a deck of cards and I say to you, there's one card in here that I've made as kind of like a prediction, and I've indicated it by reversing it in the deck. You might remember that, but I need to make sure you remember it, right? So instead I might say, last night I had a moment of dread. And in this moment of dread, I took out a deck of cards, and I took out the deck, and I went through the deck. I picked one card, and it's full of trepidation, right? Emotion maybe lets us remember things better, right? Full of trepidation. I took that card, I reversed it, and I put it in the rest of the deck, and I set that deck aside. Well, now I've told you a story and there's emotion, and you're more likely to remember it, right? And things like repetition, right? I've told you 3 times now, there's one card that's reversed from all the other ones, and now you will hopefully remember what kind of the state of that is. So the idea with this is that you're going to remember that state of things, and hopefully, if I maybe also emphasize, right, watch the deck and make sure I'm not doing anything funny with it. Watch to make sure that I'm not taking things and messing with them. I'm not changing which card I select, nothing like that, right? So now hopefully you remember that. And so we have some people helping out. Shweta, were you able to go off mute? I haven't seen it go off mute yet. I hope I'm not. There's some tiny chance I've gotten something confused with that. That's all right. So let's do this way then. We'll begin, Julie. Julie, can you help me out? All the cards in the deck, you're familiar with the deck of cards, right? They're red and black cards.
Yes.
In your mind, just choose in your mind if you think the card that I picked was red or black. Don't say it out loud. Let me know when you have that in mind.
Okay, got it.
I want to give you one chance to change your mind if you want to. I think you shouldn't change your mind, but it's up to you.
Yeah, okay. I won't change
When you're
it.
ready, say out loud if you think it was red or black.
Red.
Okay, good. All right, Louise. All right, one card, we chose red cards, right? The red cards are either diamonds or hearts. Up to you. Do you think the card that I chose, and again, get it in your mind first, right? Think of it. Is it a diamond or a heart? What do you think?
Heart.
Got it? Heart? Okay. I was going to give you a chance to change your mind, but now you're locked in.
Oh, well, no, never mind.
All right. Last but not least, right? We're selecting this card together. Julie, now, just to remind you, right, the values you could have chosen from, you're going to select the value of the card. So ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, or king. Just get it in your mind which one you think it is.
Okay.
I think you should change your mind. I'm not going to force you, but I think you should change your mind. It's up to you. Okay, moment of truth.
I'm not going to change it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Now I'm getting nervous. Say it out loud. Let's see if I got it.
3.
3.
Mm-hmm.
So the 3 of hearts? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Please understand that this is a little difficult to do over this modality. Now look, now it's in your memory, right? What the state of the deck is. All that I have to do is to show that we've got this right. So look, all the cards, I don't know if I'll do them a little closer. I don't want to do it too far. There's a 3, right? But that's a 3 of diamonds, right? All the cards, one of them, guys, one card. All the other ones face one way. All the other ones face one way. That one card. Name again the card you're thinking of.
3 of hearts.
3 of hearts. And if I've done this right, then I've created a memory in your mind that should last a very long time. Guys, thank you so much for your help with this. Those of you in the chat, if you want to say a thank you at least to our folks who are helping out. I have to, it looks like in order to do this correctly, I need to, I'll need to, I don't want to kick you guys out. It's so mean. So you'll need to rejoin. Thank you all so much. Wish I didn't have to do that. I didn't realize that I need to do it that way. And I'm gonna get things set up for the next part. Oh, did I, wait, I'm confused about who's who in the room, but all right, well, I'll sort that out in a minute. All right, so thanks for your patience as I've got all the technology set up. All right, so on to your next speakers. So next up, yes, we have 2 speakers for this next presentation. We're starting a minute or 2 early. I hope that's not going to be an issue. Maybe I'll just take a moment to see if anyone said anything interesting in the chat. See if anyone said they liked it and things. Oh yeah, and note the poll, by the way. I want to emphasize that in this extra moment because that's something that they're going to be looking at and referring to. All right, so people like the trick. I'm glad. Thank you all so much. I'm flattered. All right, and yeah, we're closer to time now. Mark, Tony, you guys ready?
Ready to go.
All right. So a few words of introduction. Oh, and let me get, this is the thing I have to make sure I get going too, is the recording for this. All right. So next up is Marc Majers and Tony Turner. Marc Majers is an author and he's a lead user experience researcher at Progressive Insurance. In addition to hosting a master's degree in information architecture and knowledge management with an emphasis on user experience design, he's also a certified usability analyst through HFI, and he's also UX certified with the Nielsen Norman Group. His skills range from user research, interaction design, digital strategy, conversion rate optimization, and usability testing. He's a board member of the UXPA in Cleveland and of the Better World Day. Also, we have Tony Turner, and Tony is a lead user experience researcher at Progressive as well. He's in addition to holding a degree in cognitive science, he's a certified user experience analyst and certified usability analyst through, so I think that's saying both the CUA and a CXA with the HFI. Tony focuses on the full range of qualitative research methods such as usability testing, observations, and surveys. So please welcome Mark and Tony from Progressive.
Thank you so much. Wanted to first thank you, Noah, HFI, of course, Eric and Jay for having us part of today. And you may have seen that we had a poll out there. So we do have some votes in there. Those votes, we're going to share that in a second. And we're excited to talk today about exponentially increasing the accuracy of your user research. And we put the poll question out there. Wanted to know, over the last year, has your organization conducted more user research activities than ever before? And our poll is showing us that it looks like about 60-40. So about 60% have done more user research activities. And that falls in line with also myself. I felt like I ran more last year because of the pandemic. And it got me to think, like, since remote research is available now, does that mean doing more is better? And it made me go back and think. So for 20 years, I've been a UX professional, and then also my side hustle at night has been a wedding DJ or a party DJ. And one gig, I had to do 2 in one day. So I did a picnic in the morning, and then I have to do a wedding at night. So I show up at the picnic, everything's great. I head to the next event. I start setting up, I get all my equipment ready. And I realize, I look down and I didn't bring any pants. All I had was shorts. So how can you actually complete a wedding when everyone's dressed in tuxes and looking really fancy? So I looked down and I had about 45 minutes before it began, and I'm out in the middle of nowhere. So there was no way for me to get to like a Walmart or something to go buy some pants. So all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, I wonder if there's a garage sale happening. So I jumped in my car and I went barreling down these dirt roads with all these rocks kicking everywhere. And I finally see a sign that says garage sale. And so I pull into the drive, and the garage door is coming down, and they closed up. So I just, a lump in my throat, and knocked on their front door. I said, this is a weird question, but you wouldn't have a pair of black pants. I gave them my size, and the woman answered the door and yelled back, Johnny, did you have a pair of black pants you were selling? And they gave me a pair of black pants for $5. And I was able to go back to the event and DJ the gig really well. And it started making me think is the same thing happens with UX, with user experience research, is you need to be prepared, but you also need to be on your toes. Things don't always go in the exact order, especially now during the pandemic, that you have to be on your toes and ready to go. But that preparation is so helpful. And that's when I started realizing that, you were just talking, Noah, this intersection between magic and UX. And the same thing I discovered one day, I'm like, wait a minute, there's this intersection between user experience professionals and DJs. They actually share a lot of the similar techniques. And that's when I started thinking, it's like that event that I did, I had to be accurate. There is a level of accuracy. I have to make sure I know my audience and prepare for the event and prepare everything. But even though I'm following all the standards, I still need to be on my toes. So I think part of accuracy is not only understanding that you have to follow standards, but then being flexible and understanding that you need to just move quickly and make those quick decisions. And I always get, so, how do you discover what people need in this profession, and also when you're DJing? And it all comes down to the fact that all organizations have some product, system, process they're trying to promote, but it's all about stepping into the user's shoes. And everyone says, well, I know my customers, but do you know them down to how they put their shoes on? Because are they tying their shoes and just slipping their feet in? Are they more of a Velcro person? Do you know the detail all the way down to that? And today we're going to talk about the fact that DJing a wedding reception, if you think of DJing a wedding reception and being at a wedding reception, it's just like user experience. But you have to be ready to ask questions and pause to find the needs. That's the challenge, is you just can't come and just read all your questions right down the line. You have to be able to pause and understand. So I'm Marc Majers. I'm a professional DJ, an author, also UX researcher. And guess what? There's somebody else here with me. It's Tony.
Hey all, I'm Tony Turner, also a UX researcher, and I'm actually a magician, like Noah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we share this performance on both of what we do, and it crosses over into being a user researcher. And the thing we want to share with you today is, how do you improve accuracy? Well, it's all about asking the right questions, but then being ready to pause and wait. And we do have our special saying today, Tony, and every time this is going to appear, we're going to play our spaceship. Tony, what is this all about?
Yeah, so this is our mantra. What just happened? Try imagining what they're doing to create clarifying questions so you can then investigate. So what that means is, when you're doing user research and you're asking questions, interviewing folks, try to imagine yourself experiencing what they're describing. When you do that, you'll realize that there are some gaps in your understanding of what they're explaining and what might happen next in that experience. So that gives you an opportunity to ask those clarifying questions and build that empathy.
Mm-hmm. And this mantra, this is something that took years to craft and come up with, but this is something that every time I do a usability study, every time I do an observation, every time I'm doing any user research activity where I'm interacting directly with the audience, I ask this. The same thing happens when I'm DJing a wedding reception. So the key here is that keep this mantra in your back pocket. And earlier, I know Brady had talked about the progression of economic value. And that's the truth, is we are now in this progression of economic value, this economy of experience. You know, we started extracting commodities, we built goods like a car, then everybody had a car and said our service is better than your service. And then now it's all about the experiences. If you walk into a dealership, it's check out our kids play zone, and we have the best business area, and go to our cafe. There's so many things that are there. Now the question mark is what's next. That is still being paved, but we are now right now in that stage of experiences, and all these three things have to come together to form UX. Businesses have a good idea what their goals are, technical constraints. Generally, when you're an organization, you have a good idea what those are, but finding the user needs, what they desires, and what actually is going to make their impact them the most is the most challenging to gather. So we are always constantly thinking about this. And I know, Tony, this is something that, just like the mantra, is always going through our mind.
Yeah, so it's really important that you think about how you're asking questions and think about why you're asking questions. So if we're building toward that end user experience, like Mark mentioned in the previous slide, you want to ask questions on behalf of the end user. So you want to think about their perspective in that experience and ask questions around that perspective.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, so back to our mantra, what just happened? So thinking about asking on behalf of the end user, imagine yourself in that user's shoes as they're describing that experience. And you'll realize that there are some gaps in that understanding as you kind of picture yourself doing what they're doing. And that opens up an opportunity for clarifying questions to be asked.
So I want you to get on your thinking cap here. And Tony, I know you had something that happened to you.
Yeah, so let's think about something you tried that you thought was easy, but turned out hard. An example I have is back in middle school, I went skiing for the first time. They did a little training. I was on the bunny slopes and I was doing pretty good. So I decided, oh, this is fine. I'm gonna hop on the big boy slopes. And I actually went off the side of the slope and landed in the snow. So I realized that it's not as easy as it looks. So think about that yourselves and see if you can come up with anything similar.
Yeah, the same with me. Is I tried surfing a couple times, and just it looked, from as far like, oh yeah, I just got to stand on a board. Like, no, there's a whole technique to it, and I think that's what brings in what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so asking questions is not as easy as it looks. So you always want to ask on behalf of the end user. That can be really challenging in the moment.
Yeah, and that's why we're going to put in front of you, are you asking questions the right way? So we're going to take a look at some techniques that we will get you in the right frame of mind as you're going through, thinking about the end user, asking what happened, and pausing. There's a couple of techniques that we recommend.
Yeah, so one of those techniques is root cause analysis. So there's 5 whys as part of that root cause analysis technique. So root cause analysis is trying to get a deep understanding of the problem that you're trying to investigate and solve. So you want to get at that root cause and the essence of a problem. You can do this before the problem happens or after the problem has already occurred. So it can be proactive or reactive, but it has to be well defined and documented in order to kind of do this technique. So the 5 whys technique kind of has you look at your problem statement and then ask, why is this happening? You get to a deeper problem and you keep going until you get to that root cause. It's a really difficult technique. Again, it's something that looks easier than it is. But if you can get all the way down through 5 whys, you can get at that real essence of the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think the technique is, it's most of us have probably heard of it, but mastering it and using it throughout your process, that's, I think, where the technique and expertise can come in, is when you can follow these 5 steps and merge them in. And guess what? There's another one, Tony.
Yeah, so there's also PET. It's actually an HFI technique. So it's really getting at understanding the feelings around a user experience or an interface, and kind of building out a framework for matching that worldview and that emotional context. So it says persuasion, emotion, and trust, and these are the three sort of pillars of this technique, this interviewing technique that kind of gets at a framework so you can actually persuade folks to do things, understand their emotions, and build trust in your product.
Yeah. And then our third technique is humble inquiry, which is around building a relationship with the person that you're speaking with. And there's a lot to this. There's actually a book series on this I would highly recommend by Egershine. But the biggest thing to walk away with this is that you are trying to be authentic with the person you are having a conversation with, and you want to build a relationship with them. And when you're building that relationship, whether that's through an interview, a usability test, an observation, that personal connection can help you go deeper and find more insights. And that's going to improve the accuracy of your research, is understanding and improving your insights. And you basically are treating every opportunity that you're interacting with a consumer, you're acting on their behalf. Anytime you're applying this philosophy and building that relationship. So we do have some tips here about when you're using all these three techniques. What are some great ways to ask those questions? Tony, any of these on the screen jump out to you?
Yeah, I want to go down to the fourth one, especially that stay curious. When you're curious, it kind of helps to actually build that relationship that Mark's talking about with humble inquiry. And then focusing on that relationship allows you to dive deeper. But that curiosity is really key in kind of building that empathy and trying to really understand a person and their experiences and their goals and needs in depth.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me, it's like, even if you know the answer, then you may just let it go, because even though you may know the answer, they may tell you it in a way that you never thought about before, and then have an opportunity to dive deeper. So I think that's where that curiosity comes in, is being able to overcome that. Well, I already know the answer. Well, just let that go out the window and try to focus on the research itself and the goals that you have. So Tony, are you ready to do a little role play here?
Sure.
Now, who are you going to be?
So I'm going to be an interviewer, a user researcher, John Wayne.
Okay. And I'm going to become Morgan, our persona. So I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. So we're selling this product. We're trying to create this product that combines GPS and weather tracking for boaters. So I'm going to interview Morgan here. So we're going to get started. So, hey, Morgan, how's it going?
Good, good.
That's good. So we talked to your wife, and she gave us permission to interview you about this.
Oh,
So I've got a few questions for you.
okay.
So as a
Talk to my
novice, how would you describe the boating process?
Well, I'm just kind of starting out, but I really think of it as a way to explore and understand myself and really get out there into the elements.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, but we'll go on from there. That doesn't really help. But how would you describe the value of GPS in 3 words?
Understand, just that's tough. Goal. I'm having a hard time here.
Hmm. Yeah, I figured you're a novice, but keep trying, keep trying.
How about goal, navigation, and weather?
Okay, I can live with that. So you would like to use a device that combines GPS and weather tracking, right?
I guess. I'm not sure.
Do you know anybody that's an actual expert boater that would agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's good. That's all we needed. Well, thanks so much for your time. That's all I need.
Okay.
The rest of the day.
So, did anybody there notice what went wrong? And this happens a lot when you're interviewing users. Tony, any of these on the screen that jump out to you? I know there was one. I I liked how you number two happened where you spoke to my wife and you invoked a little authority there. Startled me.
um,
What
yeah,
are some
then
others?
there's also kind of predicting the future, assuming that you can predict the future.
Yeah.
Kind of assuming that you know whether or not that type of app is going to be nice to use. And then, using loaded questions. I kind of
I like that. No,
introduced questions in a way that were kind of guiding you to answer in a certain way.
right. Yeah. And it's easy when you're conducting research to fall into that. Some better ways to ask those questions are what we have here is, you led to it the second time. Like, can you see someone else that you know? And a lot of people can't vision themselves. So if you can rephrase it another way as someone else, it really helps focus the end user. And you can see that Morgan was able to focus there a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so balancing the questions out instead of saying, do you like this or don't you like something? What do you like? Ask what do you like or dislike, or even ask something like, what are your thoughts on something? Instead of, having a sort of unbalanced way to ask the question.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then can you describe the process at a high level? That takes a bit of the pressure off, and it kind of lets them know that it's an informal situation. You're not interviewing them in order to have them prove their knowledge or anything like that. You just kind of want to
Right.
get an understanding at a high level. And the reality is, people know things at a detailed level, and they'll go there on their own. But we don't need to pressure them to do that.
Yeah, and I like the last one too, an example, because then they'll put it in their own words, and it helps with that active listening, which is you're there, you're actively listening to what they're saying, trying to build that relationship. So then, if you've got that example, you can recite it back and say, "Is this is what you meant, right?" And then that will help continue the conversation. So these are some example questions to think about. But we always get asked, why is it important to ask questions the right way? And there's a whole host of reasons. But Tony, is there one on here that really jumps out to you?
Yeah, definitely building trust. The more trust there is, the more vulnerable and the more open they're going to be about those describing those experiences and explaining those experiences. Developing serendipity is really interesting too, because you kind of learn things that you weren't expecting to throughout the process.
Right.
And asking questions the wrong way kind of puts a wall up between you and the person that you're interviewing
Yeah.
or observing, and that
Hey,
kind of leads to thin insights.
yeah, I was going to say it leads to number two, which is it makes them uncomfortable. And the moment that you make the end user uncomfortable, then it kind of, you got to get it back on track, because when someone's uncomfortable, that wall goes up, as you said. Yeah. So these are things that you should think about when you're really going through and wondering, why is it important? So wait a minute. Hold on a second.
So back to the mantra, what just happened? So keep in mind as you're interviewing folks, put yourself in their shoes. Imagine yourself doing what they're trying to do or explaining themselves to do, and kind of think about those gaps in your understanding as they explain what they're doing.
Yeah, Tony, I was thinking about getting this tattooed because it's it's something that I live by. But this mantra really has helped through some times where you are digging through research and you really want to find that insight that is really going to tip, especially if you're in the middle of doing some generative research where you have yet to build a prototype, and really digging through. And sometimes when you can get that customer comfortable and this mantra comes into mind, you'll be able to leap over that hurdle and be able to find that deeper insight.
Mhm.
So let's just talk about some of the things we went over. I mean, we talked about these three, I guess, high level philosophies to think about making those questions stronger. And Tony, you went over root cause analysis. Like, we talk about 5 whys. Is there anything else with root or pet that jumps out to you that would be a good takeaway for people to remember when they're asking questions?
Yeah, I think really all of these kind of goes back to that curiosity and the empathy and building the relationship. That's kind of a consistent thing throughout all of these. With root cause analysis, if you want to understand a problem deeply, that means that you care about the problem and the person that's experiencing that problem or could experience it. So if you have that sort of sense of empathy, um, then you can really kind of develop and get a skill at a lot of these techniques.
Yeah, and then that last one, that humble inquiry, which is like you said, Tony, it's kind of it's bubbling up all of these philosophies together, but it really is focusing on how that relationship can be built, and it is a process. You do need to be authentic. You do truly want to keep that curiosity open. At the same point is you are trying to uncover some research goals that you had outlined before you began the research. So going back to those goals and making sure that they're being covered, obviously while you're building that relationship is key. And then that's going to lead to those really deep insights. And then we talked about why is it important to ask them the right way? We went through our role play. We had Morgan and John Wayne interviewing, but you can tell, you can see that these questions, when they come out, I mean, it's going to build all of these things. And yeah, I know, Tony, you had a favorite one on here, and it was the C.
Yep, building trust. Yeah, I think that's key. And that's key not just in research, but in any kind of relationship. Understanding and being able to be there for each other requires that trust in order for people to be vulnerable and share those goals and needs.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Wait, one more time before I'm going to do the air horn this time.
Yeah, so what just happened, kind of when you're doing research, put yourself in that person's shoes, and as they're explaining their experiences, try to imagine yourself experiencing that too. And you'll realize that there are gaps in that understanding. So that opens up the opportunity for clarifying questions to be investigated.
It's true. And we just want you to know, we want you to be ready, think like a DJ, UX, dance floor pro, ask the right questions, be ready to pause, flex while you're asking those questions, build that relationship. It's going to improve the accuracy of your user research and the insights that you're gathering. And we did want you to know, I know this is a shameless self-promotion, but recently we did release a book called Make Your Customers Dance that does have more information that you can follow up. All right, Noah, guess we'll send it back over to you.
Fantastic. We have some questions in the Q&A box. And just a reminder, guys, please put your questions in the Q&A box and upvote the questions you want to hear because we prioritize those first. We should have time for a few of these. Here, I'll come and join you guys in the spotlight for a moment. So the top of the list right now, here is Joe says, yes, empathy is so important. I don't recall who said this, but I love this. Empathy is, I'm going to try to understand what you're going through. Compassion is, I'm going to care even if I don't understand. What are your thoughts on the role of compassion in user research?
That's a good one. Tony, did you want to jump on it first?
Sure. Yeah. I think compassion is important. So thinking about kind of the goal of user research, we're really trying to solve problems. Like I mentioned before, kind of that building trust component is important in any kind of relationship. The goal of relationships kind of differ depending on the context and everything. But for user research, we're really trying to solve that problem. So empathy is really important. We have to understand what those problems are in order to then take the step to solve them. I think compassion should be fundamental in everything we do in life. It's not necessarily, the key to solving a problem, but it is key to kind of, developing a respect and everything for people that we're interacting with. So I think compassion is key just in general,
Yeah, and I was just going to add, to me, I think that brings in that customer experience or CX element into it, where I had an experience in the past where I received some feedback from the customer experience team. I jumped in. It was a call that we went back and forth for months trying to, get a call on. And, they called on a Friday at 5 p.m. and told me their whole story about how, working with this particular product was challenging. And it was really that active listening. And I think that's where that compassion came through, because you were there regardless. You want to hear the feedback, even though it is going to be challenging to hear it, there's always a way to turn that around into something that could be positive. And I think that's where some of that compassion can come in. Good questions.
Let's look at this next one. Are there a set of standard questions to start user research? I think meaning to ask at the start of user research sessions.
Yes, I'll throw one out and then I'll tag team Tony. The one I always go to is just when you're working with your stakeholders, what do you want to learn? Question mark. And from there, have them start writing down everything they're hoping to learn. And then that will start leading into, they may write down a question. You may have a question back. Tony, did you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And then in the process of actually doing an observation or interviewing people, kind of opening it up with asking about, their role at the company or something that's sort of easy to answer, and kind of shows that you care about their experiences in general before you dive into the specific, that specific research goal that Mark is mentioning. Kind of opening it up with something light that way, and that question can vary. You again want to work with your stakeholders, but it's generally something like that. Like, can you describe your role? How do you feel? What about the systems that you're using? Things like that. So
Pain
questions
points.
that can be answered pretty easily.
Those are all questions that you'd want to kind of start by answering at the very outset before you even start talking with users, if I'm understanding that right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. And the next question we have here, can you please provide a few example questions for the PET method? I think here we're talking about within the PET research sessions, I think is what they mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like PET interviews is kind of what we were getting at with this. Yeah, it's really about looking at an interface. So imagine yourself sitting there with an end user. It's almost like a therapy session where you're having them observe an experience, putting themselves in the shoes of going through that experience and kind of describing that experience and getting into how it relates to their actual lived experience. And that can get pretty emotional sometimes. You can get into finances, you can get into relationships and things like that, as these interfaces and devices and things we use kind of intersect at these different points in our lives. So again, the specific questions, it's hard to say there's a definite question to ask. It kind of depends on the research question again and kind of what you're investigating. But it's really getting at that emotional side of things, like how do you really feel about this particular interaction and things like that. But yeah, to plug it, Noah, it's part of the CXA training, and then there's also a separate PET interviewing training that can be done through HFI. So definitely good stuff for sure.
I'm looking forward to it.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Please give Tony and Mark a big thank you in the chat. You guys did great. We'll move on to the next session. I'll just get that all set up. I'll clear out the Q&A box. I wish we could get to all of the questions, but at least I'm doing the ones that are higher on the list as far as upvotes. All right. Just getting this all lined up. And here we are. All right. Next up we have, and let me start. Make sure I get my recording going. Next up, we have Paul Morris with State Farm Insurance. Paul is a senior creative director overseeing digital creative development at State Farm within its creative services department. In his current position, he leads a team responsible for the development of creative branded digital experiences for State Farm customers and employees. Paul has a passion for combining UX methodologies and smart creative thinking and turning them into creative solutions to meet user needs. He's received his BFA in illustration and graphic design from the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, and he started his career at General Motors in 1988, working as an in-house graphic designer. Some of his past clients include Hyatt Hotels and Resorts, M&M Mars, G. Heilman Brewing Company, Dean Foods, GE Financial, Gene Beam Brands, U.S. Postal Service, PepsiCo, and Nestle. He has earned his CUA in 2017 as a CXA in 2020. Please welcome Paul Morris.
Hey, thanks, Noah. Thank you for the kind intro. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Morris. Like Noah said, I'm a Senior Creative Director in Creative Services, which is our in-house creative shop at State Farm. And before I begin, just a huge thanks to all the other presenters. It's been a great big day of idea sharing. Really enjoyed all of the speakers so far. I've been a part of State Farm for almost 17 years. I have a team responsible for delivering digital creative communications for both internal and external audiences. And we bring in a lot of UX in our work when looking at business partner strategies and project briefs. And it helps inform our design choices because our business demands we think on behalf of the user, how we create, market, and service to our customers. Our mission, in part, is to help people recover from the unexpected. So it's critical we always keep the user first. So meeting the needs of our times or demands of our business or our new reality, or as Paula mentioned this morning today, our new normal, we call it a lot of things. But the point here is really business is asking us to change the way we're looking at problems and solutions. We speak a lot about expenses and expense management. We talk about productivity and how we're spending our time. Are we getting the most out of each day? We're all talking about it and focusing on it, and our enterprise is no different. And our in-house team, is no different from the enterprise that we serve. We continually ask ourselves, how do we add value? How to create more value with what we do? How do we create more with less? How do we make a positive impact? How do we do that if we have $1 to move one lever, one notch? And how do we then convey that value story? I'd like to talk to you a little this afternoon about the idea of using solid UX techniques and methodologies to drive out these creative solutions. It's not a new idea, but our approach may be a little bit different. And I'll share a few stories relating to a pattern I've seen throughout my career, which is this. The similarities I found between the creative process and UX design methodologies and how the needs of our times have been pushing these two practices together closer, or at least it has been for us. First, I'll walk through a quick case study of one of our current projects. It's a report that State Farm put out on statefarm.com, but it's also an example of how UX combined with creative is helping us meet the demands of our time better. We'll then go back in time a little. I want to provide a couple of quick examples of the creative process and its similarity to UX design. Kind of a quick snapshot of my career. I'll try not to bore you. I'll move through that fast. But also, what I've observed in this field is all really good creative has been led by good user research or knowledge. And then likewise, how the designers and creative leaders as part of my team organically grew into UX design practitioners from a creative perspective. And then lastly, how UX design methodologies drive our decisions and help determine our approach to these creative solutions, which kind of leads us full circle back to the ESG report. And then we'll end with a little Q&A. This new reality, or having to meet the needs of our times, for us means combining UX and creative work as part of a small, nimble team where the creative, and that's the big C, the human, creative, are also certified usability analysts. As part of this new business reality, the team's projects need to start with that solid UX footing to give them the best chance of succeeding creatively. So let's deconstruct one of our latest projects. It's called the Environmental, Social, and Governance. It's a report that many large companies put out. First I'd like to point out that our products in the traditional sense, we most exclusively create websites to communicate specific information, which is a distinction I think that makes our UX a little bit different. We're not building products or apps. Our users are internal associates mostly, are usually time-starved. So we want to help get them information in an as easy to understand way as possible. And this also adds to some extra value on our part because they already have a busy life, and this tries to minimize the time it takes to ingest this information. So I just want to set that expectation, how our work is a little bit different. I don't want any confusion because I know UX can and in practice means a lot of different things in such a large landscape. So this environmental, social, and governance.
Sorry, do you have slides you're sharing?
I don't. It's just.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I just want to double check. People are asking in chat. That's fantastic. That's all right. Please go ahead.
Sure. So the environmental, social, and governance website. By environmental, we mean building resilient futures. Social is empowering good neighbors, and then governance is protecting what matters. Its executive intent is to highlight the State Farm commitment to doing what's right for our customers and our community. And this was going to be the first of its kind for State Farm, and because of this, it came in with a lot of eyes on it. And it also was a kind of a quick turn project as well. In this report, we'd highlight the things State Farm has always done and continues to do in these spaces. I mean, after all, we're a good neighbors company, but we're gathering them up and packaging them and speaking to them and then sharing them publicly. Because many other companies published a similar report, it became very clear and very important we did this right. So we had the executive intent. We had a solid strategy and a defined target audience. And from there, we began working out from a user perspective, how we might present this information digitally. We used a lot of UX techniques that we're all familiar with, heuristic reviews, kind of an audit of other companies to see what they're doing in this space, looking at companies in and out of category. Unfortunately, because this was such a quick turn project, we weren't able to conduct the user testing or interviews the way we normally would want to for a project of this size. Or with this many eyes on it. So we relied on a lot of US best practices we've learned throughout the years. So then we began putting our recommendation together. And we started with what our CEO always charges us with, and that is our enterprise needs to lead with data. And so that's what we did. To better share our approach and to gain approval, we demonstrated through data who our target market was, what they thought. We spoke to what the audience looked for in communication. We knew they wanted it mobile first. They didn't want to read this long verbose content. They wanted to breathe in this information and just be able to breathe it. They wanted to believe it, and we knew it had to be authentic. So when we first delivered our recommendation, there was a little bit of a pushback from our business partners. And I think they're probably hoping for some longer copy to try to, explain things a little bit more. Something I would refer to as probably business language or long form writing. Probably more similar to a corporate memo than authentic brand language, which I think is better suited to tell this sort of empathetic story. So we paused to consider the request, and then we looked at this executive intent and the strategy. We focused on what we knew about the audience, what they thought, their drivers, their blockers. We knew the users could sniff through insincerity. That was a big one. And that could potentially push back at our efforts, and then they could call it out on social media, maybe as a publicity stunt, which would be horrible because that's actually the opposite of the intended outcome. Happily for us and for State Farm, the user data helped us support our recommendation. And we built what we believed was the best user experience we could for the audience. And again, we knew we need to have immediate trust. So we used some basic pet design. I think Tony was referring to that in the last talk. We used some of those pet design principles to help us lead the way a little bit for some of that immediate trust. And that was like a short URL, a smart leadoff message from our CEO to gain some instant credibility, an authentic brand voice from which we could tell our story. And then we wrapped all of that within a simple design using a lot of our established branded design patterns. We added some simple illustrations and animations. And we didn't do these things because we thought, hey, let's trick these people, or our story was lacking. We use these techniques because these are a proven way to hold a user's attention long enough for us to deliver this great message. We knew the heavy lifting would be a report that would be contained within the website itself. So we used the site as just sort of a kickoff point and use brief, branded, well-written copy, and then simple illustration with enough information to get the users to want to look for more. Just a side note, the illustration was something we used as part of our brand evolution that was launched last year. And we thought it would kind of bring or allow the user to be a little bit more imaginative and then convey several concepts at one time something I don't think that branded photography would allow us to do. So we told this great story, which hit a little bit on the leadership. We talked about leadership in the industry and the business, and it was a bad year in 2020. And as leaders in the industry, as Robert Huddleston pointed out earlier today, 2000 was tough. And in our response to that, State Farm gave back $4.2 billion to customers through dividends and rate reductions, over $600,000 in Good Neighbor grants nationwide, nearly $44 million in charitable contributions. We gave away safety grants and disaster response grants, and on and on. And we did not want to lose this audience because we didn't pay attention to what they needed. This story is a great story to tell, which led us to putting our creative lens on it. We did all these other things, and then we wanted to take a step back and look at it creatively. We didn't want the user just to feel what we were saying. We wanted them to see this as a nice visual, clean design. So we spent some time thinking, what do we need to remove that wouldn't contribute to this message? How do we add little design nuances that would take this past its simple design to become more elegant and more engaging? So we added a little bit of animation to this illustration on the page, where some things spun and some things moved, some birds flew in, the sun rised. It was subtle, and it gave it some stopping power without adding any complications from an ADA perspective. We also partnered with another team for the long format report and the website, so there was some branded visual continuity between the two pieces. We didn't want the user to not have the same experience from one point to the other. So that was our approach. We used data to drive the creative solution. There's a lot of UX and design steps along the way, and it took kind of a total of our knowledge to create this nice, simple site, which I like to add to, was all done virtually and launched earlier this year. But the story didn't begin here. It started back when I started my career in creative in the late 80s. And I'll try not to bore you. I'll just give you a quick tour of how my coworkers and I approach our creative solutions. This probably will sound familiar to many of you. Our approach always began with a creative brief. In it, we found strategy, target audience, metrics around the audience, what we wanted them to think, feel, and do, success criteria, how do we plan on measuring, et cetera. And from this brief, we began to create solutions for our clients. I worked on packaging, in-store displays, retail messaging, promotional marketing. I moved around a lot in Chicago to try to get these different experiences, but I kept finding the same thing happening. I kept seeing this pattern. A lot of research and insights on the user. So when I met with a client, they would say more than just say, hey, can you design me a beer can? They would provide market, a history of their brand, a history of their consumers, the emotional relationship to the brand. How far might we go when we're redesigning? How far would consumers allow us to go? Where was the market? Was it local, regional, national? Why? Because it made their product better. And when the product was better, it'd be reflected in their sales. And another agency, we had a research team. At the time, I think we called it the research team. They were made up mostly of psychologists and were very much interested in the study of human behavior, which again, should sound very familiar because it's what we're commonly calling now user experience research or experience research team. There's always been these creative steps we followed, and there was a lot of them. But it was always a pattern, a repeatable and reappearing pattern. And I loved it because it was so much information, so many insights to pull from. And this information made the project so much better. The more information I had in hand, the better my solutions became. And it was these repeatable steps, the research and the creative process, and then my interest in both, a keen interest in both, that would ultimately lead me to formal UX training. It was the first glimpse of something closer to current day UX. And the formal approach the team took on the ESG project almost 30 years later. And my teammates had their own story too. It was similar on a parallel timeline, but many of the team members were formerly trained designers who grew up organically into digital practitioners today, but they did it creatively. They also received the same benefits I did through strong creative briefs and strategy to inform their work. They grew creatively through the projects and we worked that way until a tipping point in our department led to the creation of a small, nimble team of designers and developers who devoted their time specifically to digital solutions. They grew their capabilities from design through to development through this project work, becoming technologically savvy designers who really understood the digital landscape and the importance of the UX in their work. They were able to pull a lot of information off the web and learn a lot more about UX, its processes, its methodologies, and then be able to put them back into their work. So we assembled our team. I had my creative journey and they had theirs, and they both led to the same place. They led to UX. So how would we become the thought leaders and experts at communicating on behalf of the user? We would create more with less. How would we do that? How would we add the value our users and enterprise demanded of us? And how would we meet the needs of our business partners? We had a few things that we knew for sure. We had UX knowledge and knew spending the right amount of time up front for UX planning, even if it took longer, was less expensive in the long run. I mean, no one wants to rush through a project only to spend twice the amount of time on the development. We knew and understood the digital process from project intake through to production and knew the right questions to ask. We knew the users knew more than we did about what they wanted, and that is huge. I mean, the user knows more than we do about what they want. And we know our business partners' expertise actually excluded them from being users, which is a tough concept to convey. And it took a lot of diplomacy to try to get that point across. With these things in mind, we began our own UX creative journey. We had a lot of sticky note meetings with BPs and leadership. We tried the best to understand the actual problems, to prioritize content and user groups. Data became even more influential as we began formulating these solutions. Business partner buy-in actually was made easier through data in these working sessions. And then over the next 5 or 6 years, we continued our growth. We changed team members, we evolved, and our work became stronger. And the results led to half the team taking CUA training last year, which is a great step for us. And while so much of what they learned of UX was done on the job, this formal training from HFI helped them solidify and validate their experiences. And it gave them a bigger UX vocabulary to use when discussing their work. So now we have strong creative minds combined with formal UX UI training, and the result is better creative solutions. Why? Because they're working with an eye on design and front-end development. And having UX thinkers in the room at the same time makes those experiences we build richer. As creative thinkers, we're very much interested in the how and why of the solution. And many of these questions are naturally answered by the user through smart UX methodologies and then the creative process. But we found when creatives were in the room hearing what the user is saying, or even conducting interviews themselves, they're hearing those things with designers' ears. And then the user insights and creative insights are both firsthand knowledge, and they're tied together. I know this may not be the norm, but it's proven to work really well for us and allows us to meet the needs of our users and enterprise. Letting users provide input to team members, the team members then making changes on the fly and getting back to them, in some cases in a day, can help move this experience along even quicker and then add to the value we're being asked to bring every day. And of course, the opposite is also true. Without these UX foundations, our solutions wouldn't be nearly as engaging or relevant, or add the value we're being asked to add. And just as important, UX is helping us determine our approach to these creative solutions. It's helping us decide the size of a project, or in some cases, does the project even need to be in a digital platform? Maybe it's a video, or maybe it's an email. Maybe it's anything else, but it's probably not a digital deliverable. UX is driving these decisions and making and leading our creative solutions, which leads us back to that ESG report and how we began looking at a solution from a user's perspective, because it started with that UX. So what does this all mean? I think it's through these experiences I've become convinced UX expertise, both learned on the job and through formal training, combined with creative expertise, becomes a really, really potent mix. And the UX information and creative thinking needed to fully form ideas into digital solutions allows us to do more with less, which in turn supports our new business reality. So by combining UX and creative, we're actually creating these true user-centered solutions. And for us, that is meeting the needs of our time. So thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, and I appreciate the chance to put forth some of these ideas and processes for your consideration. It's definitely one more way we're finding we can add value and provide a great place for UX to live and drive out these creative solutions. Now, Noah, I think we've got a few minutes. I'd be up for any questions that we have.
Yeah, I encourage you guys to put them in the Q&A box or upvote any that you see. Right now, we don't have any questions in there.
Okay.
So you may have been so thorough to cover all of it that there weren't a lot of hanging issues. Maybe that's what it is. Not to insult the other speakers. Let's see. Yeah, a few people asked earlier about the screen share. Let's see. All right. Anyone? Any questions? I see people saying thank you. All right. Well, let's just please everyone give Paul a big warm thank you in the chat box. Oh wait, no, wait, I take it all back. We do have questions. It just took a little.
I almost pressed the button.
It's that like I gotta refresh in time thing. All right. None of these have been upvoted yet, so we'll just do them chronologically, although they all happen at the exact same minute. All right. So Jay asks, where do you see this approach going from here?
Well, I'd like to continue to expand it. I think we've had a lot of success with what we've been able to do so far. But I think building even more UX and allowing even more user experience techniques and interviews and trying to get that. I think we use it on these bigger jobs that have a lot of visibility, but I think the importance of that will start to trickle down, I think, into smaller projects. And I think probably getting more of, using more of that approach in all of our work, and maybe not just digital, maybe in some of the video work and some of the marketing work, although marketing has a lot of really good research as well. I think that's probably, for us, the norm. The future is probably just making both of those things richer.
Nice. Next up, Prima asks, setting up the UX team in an organization is quite a task, but are there any minimal processes to start off the setup?
Well, for us, it was because we had the creative brief already. We kept adding to that. So the conversations that we're having with business partners was more about the experience of those things and the experience of what communication are you trying to convey? What do you want them to get out of these things? And so instead of saying, this is a formal UX shop per se, how would we have these conversations from a UX perspective that just allowed us to build better? And we do have a UX shop that's in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually in Illinois. And so they're responsible for a lot of the design patterns that you see on statefarm.com and some of the governance around the brand. And so they have done a lot of UX, and we can use some of that stuff in our work. So I'm not probably the best person to ask that question.
Great, though. All right, next question. Joe asks, you mentioned that you had to rely on standards and guidelines for your research. Do you see any drawbacks to not involving users directly?
For this particular project, there's always that. If you're not able to actually come in contact with users, there's always a little bit of that risk. What we're able to do, and I'm hoping I'm going to answer your question. I think what we're going to be able to do with this project, because it was a rush, we had to get something out that, it might be an MVP. I think it's really well done. But in terms of a usability perspective, I think we could probably leave that out there for a couple of months, get some users and do some research then, and then put a V2 out that would probably answer a lot of those questions that we wanted to have asked at the beginning.
Often having to work under constraints. That's a theme for us in UX, right? Next question. Someone asks here, you mentioned using diplomacy in conversations with stakeholders around not being their users, and around that, then the stakeholders not being the users, I think this is saying. That's a common thing we see in our practice. Any tips on those conversations?
Well, I can give you an example. We had something that was for associates. And there's a difference between what associates get and what leadership gets. And the ask was from leadership about what they wanted on something that was for associates.
Mhm.
So we had to have this conversation to say, well, we really need to ask them. We know what you want, and we're going to take that into consideration, and we're going to walk that line. But you're not a user, and it wasn't. It's not to say what you want isn't important, because we have to reconcile those two things together. We have to. I mean, we work at a company. We have bosses, and there's a hierarchy like everywhere else in the world. So we want to walk that line to say, hey, we understand the communication you want to do, but let us do it in a way that is going to be received by the user the way they would like to do it, or would like to hear it or receive it. So it is a diplomatic conversation. I don't think we can just come straight out and say like, what you're saying isn't important, because it is. It just needs to be translated, and we can translate for them. But I think their expertise in many cases excludes them from being part of that user journey.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation sometimes. Yeah. The next question is actually kind of accidentally split between two here, but I think I can do it just the same. Claiborne asks, our UX research team works through product managers, and they don't always give us direct access to design. Do you have issues with other folks in the organization wanting to insert themselves in the process? We found more success working directly with the design from the get-go.
I haven't, but I would agree. And because our team is sort of a from one end to the other kind of team, we have the ability to work on the intake, get that user information. Like I said, a lot of times it's a creative director conducting interviews with users, with the designers in the room, so they can hear those things. And then we're working with the developers at the same time from wireframes on. So it is a little bit, it's a little bit of a closed loop. So I don't have that separation, and I know what you're speaking about. I know that pain.
Yeah.
But that we don't experience on this team, because it's such a small, nimble, set up to be a small, nimble team like that.
Nice. And then let me just see. Are you using any research standardization the way that design systems, I think this is meaning the way that design systems use kind of a standardization around design? Do you have a standardization around research?
We don't. A lot of times when we're working on taxonomy, we will have those interviews and try to ask about a lot of different things. It's hard to standardize that. I mean, it really does depend on the project. And it's a lot easier to standardize what those design pattern libraries are, because they are built for a specific thing, and they're reusable, and we can pull those things in as developed pieces already. So we know that the research has been in on those things. I don't have a specific methodology for how we would attack each project. It really is. It's a user experience for us in that way, that when the project comes in, we kind of figure out how to work it when it comes in. And again, we don't come from a strictly research point of view. We kind of mix those things together. So we're usually looking for specific answers. We might, like everybody, we have our own ideas about what we think it should be, but when users tell us something different, we go that route. So I think we have some design best practices that we use, and some UX best practices that we use, and that helps us get to town faster. But it's not standardized.
Awesome.
I think I would say that our process end to end is a standardized process, but those pieces are probably a little bit more, I don't know, as we go along.
More created to fit the need as you go. Yeah.
Improv.
That's great. All right. This has been really fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for answering those questions. And thanks for all of you guys who asked questions. Sorry, Gillian, I saw we didn't get to yours, but I got to as many as we could that were upvoted. Thank you so much. All right.
All right, thank you.
And next we're going to go to, where are we? Just finding myself. All right, here we are. Next up, we have Eric Brown with Weird Guy Creative. Eric is passionate about next generation leaders. He's been. Let me wait. Try this again. I need my spotlight. I need everyone to be able to see me, and I'm going to record it too. Okay. As I was saying, next is Eric Brown with Weird Guy Creative. Eric is passionate about next generation leaders. Having been in leadership for almost 3 decades, he's ardent about helping creatives transition from individual contributors into becoming leaders. Because creativity is a major differentiator in today's corporate landscape, he believes that more creatives should sit in leadership positions. Eric has held nearly every role available in the creative department: art director, digital director, e-learning designer, experienced architect, and digital strategist. Currently, Eric works with one of the largest insurance companies in the US. Previous companies he's worked with include UPS, Rockwell Collins, Chick-fil-A, and Sea Ray Boats. Please welcome Eric.
Hey, Noah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear.
All right, excellent. Let me share my screen and we will get the show on the road. All right, tell me if you can see that.
Just yet.
Let's see. Well, give me the right screen.
While you're doing that, I'm going to clear out the Q&A.
Oh, escape there. Okay.
These little technical hiccups are a normal part of our world today. Very good. I see the screen clearly.
Yay. Thank you so much. All right, now let's see. Tell me if you see my slides.
Looks like we're looking at your presenter view, not the slide view.
Okay, well, we'll flip that around. There we
See
go.
lots of people saying hello in the chat. Very good. Now we see it clear.
How's that?
All set. Yeah, now we see the slides. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, as you saw, yes, definitely. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Eric and HFI, for inviting me to this year's conference. So today, in our brief time together, I do want to talk about the turbulent waters of team dynamics. So as UX practitioners dealing with people, right? It's been my experience that whatever size of the organization that you're in, that you're going to find yourself with various teams working on various projects. And guess what that means? There's going to be some bumps or hiccups in the road. So today, what my goal is to share with you guys some strategies that would help you as a leader. And let's just take this next step and just talk about something I know about each of you. And that is, no matter what your title, you're a problem solver. And that takes creativity. And you're also a leader, no matter where you are in your organization. And I think that was actually talked about earlier in I believe it was Robert's session, where he talked about, you know, you're a leader wherever you are in the organization. You have that opportunity to lead. But how does that tie to our theme? So UX meeting the demand of the times. So as you heard Noah say, because creativity is such a major differentiator in today's business landscape, I personally believe that more creatives should sit in leadership positions, and that means you. And I hope that as you transition from that single contributor role into that leadership role, that is a smooth, or can be, or through today, I hope I'll give you some little tips and strategies to make that transition a little more smooth. So let's talk about a little story here. Has anybody been whitewater rafting before? Well, let me tell you, it's a ton of fun, and it's terrifying adrenaline rush at the same time. I had an opportunity to go whitewater rafting years ago, and went with some people that I knew, some people that I didn't know, and they put you into teams, and they put you in a raft. So some of you know each other, and some of you don't. And you know, it's an event that it's often new for a lot of people. Some people have never done it before. It was my first time. I found that as we started off and the river was kind of smooth and flat, that there was time to talk and start to build camaraderie and to start to create some kind of like a mini culture. And then communication was definitely key. That was something that we found our guide saying, you need to listen to everything that I say. You need to do what I tell you to do. Because our guide had seen ahead, had been down the river, knew those twists and turns, knew those drops, knew when we needed to paddle on the left or the right. And so just that collaboration, that communication, that expectation set. It was critical that we work together as a unit, not just one person paddling in one direction, the other person paddling, backwards or something like this. We had to work as a group. We had to work as a team. There weren't any lone rangers. There weren't, just somebody just sitting back doing their own thing. We all were working together. And guess what? If one person fell out, our entire focus as a team would shift towards helping that individual and really bringing them back into the raft if we needed to. So I think it's funny, if you see this picture a little more closely, I mean, there's some interesting team dynamics here. You see the guide, she's got her tongue sticking out. You'll see somebody else, and it looks like there might have been a photo opportunity or somebody on the bank there. You'll see somebody else has kind of got their raft, their oar up in the air, like they're, woohoo, celebrating. And then you've got some of these others, and they're busy looking at, oh my goodness, we're going down a drop and we're going into these rapids. And so you have different little team dynamics that are going on here. So like the guide in the raft, my goal for today is to share with you guys some strategies that I hope will help you avoid most all of the rapids, but definitely the rocks of team dynamics. So these themes that we've talked about, excuse me, really it started to align with a framework that I'd heard about several years ago. And before I share that with you, as you're looking at this screen, can you relate to any of these statements? Are you new to a team, putting one together? Are you leaving a team? Does your team not get along? Do you kind of butt heads? Do you feel like you're not heard? Your ideas aren't heard? Or do you feel like, hey, my team's rocking it. We're killing it. We're crushing it. This is awesome. We're having lots of fun, and I'm helping encourage and grow the people around me. Can you relate to any of those? So if you can, then you've experienced some of this framework that I happened upon years ago. And it's credited to a gentleman named Bruce Tuckman, and maybe you've heard of it. And it's 4 phases of a team, and that is forming, storming, norming, and performing. And because of our brief time today, I'd love to cover all these. And I've actually got something that I'll share it towards the end, where you'll have a chance to learn about each of these more in depth. But for our time today, we're going to talk about forming. And when a team is forming, it's really unique that this happens whenever a team is added to or someone is removed out of. And I've had a team recently where we've had an individual who was transitioned to a new leadership role, and we had 2 who recently left. And so as a team, while we've still worked with each other, we're going through this forming stage. And it's something that you'll find that all teams go through. So one of the things specifically that we're going to talk about in this forming, and one of the strategies, is what I call the understanding the language barrier. And specifically what I'm talking about is temperaments. And I'm talking about your unique temperament and the temperament of your teammates. And it's like speaking a different language. So let's talk about temperaments and personalities, because sometimes those are intermingled. What we're talking about today is temperaments. Now, personalities are feelings, emotions, their behaviors, They are something that evolves over time. They're impacted by your age. They're impacted by your ethnicity, gender, religion, birth order, your environment, and more. And so they kind of evolve and change depending on where you're at and who you're around. Temperaments, however, are really your unique wiring, and they rarely change. So think of temperaments as the why behind your personality. Now, I'm often asked, well, can someone's temperament change? And I will say that, and unfortunately, if there's any kind of catastrophic events or, any physical or mental, disorders, there is that possibility for sure. And we've certainly seen cases of that where people are under extreme duress, and we see things like that. So why is this topic important? Well, I think part of what I've learned over the years, and maybe you're learning as well, and this is a popular topic for you, and you're hoping to get something out of this, is that understanding the mix of our team is critical to building a high-performing team. That's what we all want. We want to be part of one. We want to build one. So if you're new to teams or forming a team or getting to know each other, that's really going to be crucial and necessary. And it's going to be critical to help propel you forward as a leader and propel your team forward, and make sure that really you're all speaking the same language. All right. So I want to share with you these 4 temperaments. Now, you might have heard of Ned Herman's whole brain. That's a popular assessment. The DISC, maybe some of you have taken that in places that you've worked before. Galen's 4 temperaments, that's been around forever. Sanguine, choleric, melancholy, you've heard those. A newer framework I want to share with you is, and also I want to make it available to you, is this Creatives Lead Temperament Types. So you'll see here, learning which one of these temperament types you are will help you better understand yourself, but it'll also help you and enhance the environment in which you're working. So a couple things here to take note of. These top quadrant, these folks tend to be more extroverted. And by that, I mean, they process their thinking externally. You'll be in meetings and somebody will be thinking out loud. They're the extroverted ones. They're the ones who immediately will start talking. Now, this next group down below tends to be more introverted. And so by that, it's someone who's processing internally. They're the quiet ones in the group. They're the ones that you might need to call out. And often when you do, they've got really great information to share. Then what we see is on this left side, we'll see that people, these kinds of temperaments tend to be more people-centric, more people-oriented. And then the right side tends to be more task-centric and task-oriented. Making sense? You guys starting to see this in some of the people that you work with? Maybe you're seeing it in your boss. All right. Well, now I want to do is I want to take a little time to dive a little deeper into each temperament with some of the time remaining. We've got about 5 minutes or so. And let's talk about these. So let's talk about the entertainer, okay? And let's talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses and some strategies for dealing with the entertainer. So the entertainer, this person is outgoing, they're the responsive, warm, friendly, energetic, compassionate, enthusiastic. Some of the weaknesses, however, is they can be a little scattered. They can be a little undisciplined. They can be unproductive at times. They can tend to exaggerate something. So some of the communication strategies with the entertainer temperament that you want to take into consideration is be interested in them, show some interest, spend some time. Maybe in the meeting, you'll just spend a little time chit-chatting with them. And then you want to support their dreams. Of course, feelings are big to the entertainer, but don't hurry the discussions. And when you're going over specifics, be sure that you get agreement on those specifics from them. And you'll probably want to follow up in some kind of written email or writing just to make sure that, hey, here's the things that we agreed upon. Let's take a look at the next one. the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur has these visionary, practical, productive, strong-willed. Remember, this is that extroverted, task-oriented, decisive leader, right? Well, some of the weaknesses of this temperament can be cold, unemotional, self-sufficient, maybe even sarcastic or unforgiving. If that's the case, some strategies to work with this individual when communicating with them. Let's just think about how can you support their goals and objectives. You want to be precise and you want to be organized when you meet with them. If you disagree, don't disagree, based on your feelings. But they want to hear the facts. They want to know that you've got the data to support. They're happy to dialogue back and forth, but you want to argue the facts and not feelings. And then a focus on results is huge for this temperament type. Our next one is the gamer. So the gamer, what are some of the weaknesses and strengths of the gamer? So the strengths are they're calm, they're easygoing, they're the diplomats on the team, they're humorous. I think it's interesting to note, if anyone has read, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, years ago, he had his level 5 leader, and actually this kind of individual was that leader, that one who was diplomatic, easygoing, not easily ruffled, kind of people-centric, and could get the job done. However, some of the weaknesses that they have is they can be a little selfish, stingy sometimes, fearful. They can procrastinate, and some of that is based on fear. Sometimes it can be indecisive. So how do you communicate? What's the way to learn the language of the gamer? You want to be sincere and non-threatening. Show that you're listening. And it's listening to be heard and not listening just for you to make a point. Try to mirror their kind of attitude. If you tend to be very bouncy and high energy, kind of bring it down a little bit and try to be a little more easygoing. And then assure them that you stand behind their decisions, because if you remember, they're can be on the introverted side. They're going to process things internally and think about it. And so make sure that you understand and also stand behind their decisions, because they're not going to make these spur of the moment kind of decisions. And then finally, we're going to look at the architect. The architect is analytical, self-disciplined. They're going to be very industrious. They're going to be very sacrificing. I mean, I have quite a few friends that are developers that are the architect temperament, and they are just very sacrificing individuals and work very hard and long hours. Some of the weaknesses, they can be a little bit moody sometimes, self-centered, a little touchy, maybe some unsociable, maybe a little critical. So just some of those things to consider. And a lot of the weaknesses come out when we find that we're under stress or duress, right? So how do we communicate with an architect? Well, you need to be thorough and well-planned, because they place a lot of emphasis on that. You want to give them time to verify. So if you're throwing out information, or if you're in a meeting, they're going to be processing that, or they may leave the meeting and you may say, hey, can you get back to me within 24 hours? Give them time to kind of verify the information themselves. Don't rush them in their decision-making. They'll appreciate that. And provide evidence that's accurate, because that's very important to the architect. So it looks like our time has flown by pretty quickly. And you may say, okay, Eric, this is really interesting stuff. How do I find out about my temperament? How do you find out about your temperament? How do you find out about your team's temperament? And if you are asking that question, I'm glad you asked that, because I actually have a gift that I want to give to you, and I want to make it available for all the conference attendees. Also, Noah, for you guys and for the HFI staff. This is my newest book, just came out yesterday. It has a lot of this information and a lot more. It covers a lot of the forming, storming, norming, and performing. It's broken into those 4 sections and has practical applications and strategies for each of these. So if you're a new leader, you want to be a leader, if you're a seasoned leader and you're raising up those around you, I want to make this available to you free of charge. You can see that short link there. So tell your teammates, tell others. If anybody didn't make it to today's conference, I'm sorry. You got 2 days to get this for free. And, this is just such rich and powerful information. I wish, I could go into a lot more detail today, but that just not allowed with the time that we've got. So there's lots of other tools and worksheets in here, as I said, and there's a link to a temperament assessment. So you can go in and you can take that assessment and find out what your temperament is and what the one for your team is. Powerful stuff. Get it today. Noah, I guess we're ready for any Q&A. It looks like we've got maybe 5 minutes left.
That's awesome. Yeah. And if you don't mind, Eric, it might be great if you could put that URL into the chat box to let people get to it more easily. I know I'm going to get that. That sounds really exciting. This has been a great talk. And so, guys, if you please put questions, we have 9 minutes for questions. If you please put questions in the Q&A. And of course, if you see questions that you'd like to hear the answer to, if you put those if you'd upvote those, please, that'll help us out. And yeah, this will be great. So I'll start with the one here at the top. So Joe asks, I only heard one way to communicate with the entrepreneur. Any others you could mention?
Any other ways to communicate with the entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So again, remember where this temperament type is. They're going to be task oriented and extrovert. So they're going to appreciate you being proactive, coming to them. Again, they place a lot of emphasis on tasks, doing it right, and making sure that you have data to back up whatever you're working on. So oftentimes, specifically within UX, when I'm working with various teams, and I know that we have an entrepreneur temperament that we're going to be sharing with, I often tell them that, let's come with multiple solutions and not just one that we feel is just like the rock solid, and here's just a couple more that we did to have some extra ones, but let's have 3 solid with data to back it up and present that kind of information. And be willing to be polished and be ready to kind of stand your ground. And that's something that the entrepreneur will appreciate and will definitely you'll build a level of trust with them. So that's a really good question.
Awesome. Next up, Jillian asks, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, it might be Gillian, asks, what if someone is strong in their idea and won't listen to your idea?
So someone is strong in their idea and will not listen to yours. Yeah. And I think that's where there's ground that has to be sowed, right? In the sense that you might be new to a team and you might find yourself falling into this kind of a situation. And you, in one sense, early on, you'll want to kind of pick your battles and decide, okay, is this really something that I need to put my foot down, something or I really want to escalate and go head to head or toe to toe? Or, I mean, I like, as late Stephen Covey used to say, do you want to seek to understand the other person and show, listen to them, hear their ideas, and then offer an alternative to that? And be willing to have the data and your information and your ideas that you can back up. Hopefully, what would happen over time is you would start to build a rapport with different teammates. And as we've said here today, learn to speak their languages. It doesn't come natural. I mean, you'll find that whichever temperament you are, that language comes very natural to you. And it's learning to speak the language of others it takes practice, and it really does. It's not something that just happens overnight. I've taught this material to a lot of our teams, and I've also taught it to some leadership teams, and it takes practice. So keep practicing.
Awesome. I'm surprised this is getting so many upvotes, but we'll ask it. 2 different people asked the question about basically, is it available outside of the Kindle version as like a open format or PDF or something like that? I would assume that it's, since this is a short-term thing you're offering, I would be surprised. But people have asked.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Look at that. So what that tells me is that folks have already downloaded it and they've clicked on the link, which is awesome. It is a short-term version. I've got it available in Google. I'm actually working with another gentleman at this time for a much more robust version. Unfortunately, with this newer version, I can't make that free of charge. So I would use what's there. And when the newer one comes out, I'll have both available. So one will actually go into a lot more depth, but there will be a charge that's associated with that assessment. But more to come on that.
Awesome.
Thanks for asking.
Let's see. Before these questions, I just want to note a comment in the comments. Brian said, speaking as someone who worked under Eric's leadership 20 years ago, he lives this. He's a terrific mentor and consistent in his leadership and UX philosophy. Next question, I'm fascinated by this one especially. What should the ideal temperament be for leaders?
Say that again, Noah.
What's the ideal temperament for leaders to have?
You know, I think that's an interesting question, and as a good UXer, I'll say that depends. You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting information and research out there. If you've read, you know, leadership books, that you'll have, you know, these different gurus, if you will, say, you know, this is the kind of leader and this is the kind of leader.
Yeah.
I think honestly, what I've learned is that, you know, there's people who certainly have a natural charisma, and that can be based on their temperament. I think it's interesting that here in the West, we put a lot of emphasis on that. We put a lot of emphasis on the person who can stand in front of the group, the person who can talk loud or talk over, the person who can, you know, sound, you know, demonstrative and, you know, body dynamics and all this kind of thing. We tend to put a lot of emphasis on that, but there are people that lead in, you know, just, you know, very humble areas and are very perseverance, have a very focused temperament. I don't know that there's really any one that makes a best leader. I think a lot of folks tend to think of the entrepreneur temperament as, oh, that's, you know, what everybody should want to be. I don't agree with that. I mean, I've seen people who have had primary, and you'll find that you often have a primary and secondary temperament, but I found that people really in all those different temperaments can and have been leaders and very successful. And some who, you know, in some of those ones that we would think, oh, that's a leader, we've seen them crash and burn.
Interesting. Wow, it sounds like people can get a lot more about that, around the depth of that in the book. But let's, I think that this next question has got 2 upvotes and it kind of follows on for that, right? Even though it sounds like you work within whatever your kind of temperament type is, right? Once you have a sense of that, right, how do you work on yourself? So do you want to work more on your areas for improvement, or do you want to work more on kind of leaning into your strengths?
Yeah, great question. That calls for a lot of introspection. I think that's something that there's a lot of information that's out there, and there's a lot of things that crowd our time and are, you know, are yelling for our time. Solitude and silence is an unpracticed or a rarely practiced trait. And I think that's something we need to get back to, and that is just, you know, being still, spending time in solitude, you know, whether it's, you know, reading or just, you know, doing some introspection. Also, you know, one of the things that I've also often shared is ask your team. I mean, if you are not, you know, if your emotional intelligence isn't, you know, very high, and maybe you don't really quite, some of this doesn't resonate with you or comes across as touchy-feely, and you're just like, well, that's not me. Ask your team, and you know, if you've built a trust rapport with them, and ask them to be upfront, honest, and blunt, and they will be, and they'll tell you, yeah, you know, this is an area that you could work on. And you know,
that's a great point.
Yeah, another thing I would just encourage, and I think we're at time to get ready to go into a break, is you want to have a group of people around you, and that group, you want to have people that I call truth tellers, those people that will tell you the truth no matter what, even if it hurts your feelings. Because honestly, you want to know if you're at a party and you got a piece of broccoli sticking out of your teeth, right? You want you want those people that are, your close friends. You want people that are mentors. You want people that you can pour into. You want people that you can learn from. You really want to develop this group around you, and that's also covered in the book as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for all of this, Eric. It's a tremendous amount of, I think, wisdom that you've bestowed on us today. So thank you. And guys in the chat, please extend Eric a big thank you in lieu of applause, because we can't really do that in this modality. Awesome. All right. So as Eric mentioned, it's time for the break now. So we're going to do a 15-minute break. I'll put up the schedule again just to remind you when we're coming back, but it's 15 minutes from now. Well, 14 minutes from now. I'm going to clear out the Q&A as much as wish that we could get to all of these. Although I think you guys still see the Q&A when I'm clearing it out. That's just how we see it here, but all the same. Just helps us to not get confused anymore. Oh. Very nice. And Eric has shared, Eric, if you switch the drop down to all panelists and attendees, Eric is sharing the link to for all of us in the chat. And Eric, I saw you had some other links there, so whatever links you want to share, you're welcome to. There we go. Awesome. I'm going to share the schedule in just a moment after I go to that link. And just by the way, if you're wondering what you're seeing when I show the schedule, I've kind of blacked out, darkened the sessions that have passed, just so you can see where we are right now. All right, back in just a few. Car, I don't know if you can see, we have a break going on right now. I see our car saying something in the chat about who is here. Your chat is also only going to the panelists. It's not going to the rest of the participants. We have, but just to mention it, we have currently 185 participants, even though it's just a break now. So some people may have stepped away. Let's see, we still have another, what was it, 5 minutes? Blocking my own screen here.
I know this is Steve, just doing a mic check.
Hey, Steve, I hear you clearly. Yeah,
Perfect.
5 minutes. Excited for your talk.
Yep, should be fun.
I'm a little disappointed, I confess. The magic trick thing I did earlier, I don't know if you saw it, Steve, but the thing when you try to move someone into the attendees did not go the way I thought it worked, because I've got a lot of experience with Zoom, not a lot of experience doing Zoom magic, like almost none, and none doing it over a Zoom webinar, which is a different mode. That's why, yeah, that part didn't go as expected.
The new hobby, Zoom magic.
Well, it's actually, there's, I mean, I am not one of them, but there are a bunch of really, really good, really successful, like virtual magicians, like Zoom magicians who do
Really?
whole shows over. They're fantastic. Yeah. I mean, if anyone, is a fan of magic or interested in that kind of thing, I mean, I'll name drop a couple of my friends who are doing regular shows. Jason Saran in particular is doing a regular show that's a virtual show that you can get tickets to. If you're interested in bringing someone on to do an event for your company. He's not doing public shows, he does private shows. But Harrison Kramer, these are both New York guys, and they have both been incredibly successful in the pandemic. I'm really very very pleased with that, because a lot of performers are struggling, so that some of them are doing well is nice. I see Louise mentioning. Yeah, Louise is mentioning that the perception of people is another thing that UX and magic have in common. Yeah, there's a bunch of things in common. The way I scripted that was just, I had I do script my stuff, right? And I don't follow the script perfectly, but I had an earlier version of the script where I kind of had more listing of stuff they have in common, but it got tedious. I kept it succinct. The way I used to talk about it, I still sometimes like talking about it this way, right? Because they are both about expectation. Both magic and UX are about expectation. And in particular, UX has this kind of this very boring principle that I don't hear people call out that often, because it's so obvious in its way as principles go, but it's just the principle of like, find out what people expect and make it the way that make it so that it fits with their expectations, right? That doesn't mean they can tell you how it should be designed. That's part of, I think, probably why people don't say that, but it's still like, find out how people expect to behave and have it fit with that, right? In that same way, though, magic is basically the opposite of that, right? You find out what people expect, the state of the world that people expect, and then you do the opposite, right? So interesting to see that intersection sometimes. Let's see, I guess we have 2 more minutes left in the break. I don't want anyone who stepped away, I don't want them to miss the beginning of your chat or even your introduction, Steve. So we'll get started soon. Yeah. This already. And maybe I'll just say again, you guys are probably sick of me saying it by now, but I'll say again for the various folks attending, reminder to put questions in the Q&A box, reminder to upvote the questions. We'll mostly focus on that towards the end of the talk. Well, at the end of the talk, of course. What else am I supposed to mention? Oh, the recordings will be available later. Those will be coming up. We anticipate this coming week. They should be coming out. Okay. They'll get sent to your email addresses, the ones you used to sign up.